becoming the best classical pianist I could. So I got my degree in classical music, in performance and composition. All the meanwhile, I was doing studio work. As a 17, 18, 19-year-old, I became a session player, and became a well-known session player in Toronto for Sony Music, and I was performing on a lot of big records at the time. And at the same time, I was studying conducting with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. So it was just wild, and my nighttime gig, just kind of keep things going. I was the lounge piano player at the Four Seasons Hotel, and for 3 years I literally played the piano from 5 to 7:30 every night in the lounge, Monday through Saturday, and I got hired to perform for a lot of the big the TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. They would hire me for, like, Elton John came to town and hired me to play his party. Tom Hanks, and it was a real early introduction into sort of that Hollywood scene, if you will, where I all of a sudden, you sit there, you're playing, and one day I was playing and Stain walked in and sat down with me to just right beside me. And I was a kid, I was 18, 19 at the time, 20 years old, and I was pounding away. But all this to say that I learned the American songbook. And it's sort of like by osmosis, by learning Cole Porter, it's Misty. I mean, all these great songs just got into my fingers and got into my blood. And eventually I graduated, and I just started writing hits, and I became an arranger producer for Sony Music. And my first big hit was with Celine Dion, a song I co-wrote with Aldonova. It was called "The New Day Has Come," and global hit around the world. And those kind of songs change your life, and they give you, if anything, they give you the opportunity to sort of start to say no a lot more, and not choose the B-roll movies just to make a living, if that makes any sense.
For sure.
And that was, and I'm giving you context. I was in my mid to late 20s when I popped my first #1 global hit with Celine, and I had already burnt out. I think I was programming, arranging music, barely sleeping, working the job at the Four Seasons, and then all of a sudden, those kind of songs, like I said, provide you with just a different level of income. And I felt for many years, they were asking me, what is a good chill piano album to listen to? And there's a lot of incredible piano players. There's Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans, and there's a handful of some good new age contemporary piano players, but I couldn't think of one at the time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take my own little mini sabbatical that time and write my own sort of album that people could, be in love to, cook to, read to, be introspective to, if that makes any sense. And that was, over 10 years ago. And it was a roaring hit in Canada with Universal Music, and it became a #1 album on the classical and pop charts. And it became sort of, I guess, the genesis of now Tales of Solace 14 years later. But okay, now
14 years. I love that. Just slip that in there.
Absolutely. But there's a big gap in between. So in between there, I moved to LA, and life becomes an absolute whirlwind for me here. I think within 6 days of moving here, I had co-written a song called Wrecking Ball for Miley, Cyrus, and it hits #1 globally, and my life's spinning. Furniture hadn't yet arrived from Toronto. I was, family, 2 kids, just everybody was sleeping on the floor. The furniture hadn't arrived, and everybody wants to get in the room with the person who has the #1 song in the world. And listen, if anything I want to share with your community is that, there is such a thing as creative burnout. When I had those string of hits 7-8 years ago, my publisher was putting me in the room hoping that we'd create another one. And what you don't realize is that hits, you can't explain the ingredients and the magic formula in creating a hit song. They just happen. You got to be prepared for it. And they were wanting me to write a song a day, and I don't operate that way. Some people do, but you have to save you have to preserve your great ideas and hold on to them for the right opportunity. That's what I've learned over the last decade plus. And so I'm back at the piano. I mean, we can talk about that in a second, why I decided to come back. But anyhow, I hope that's
Oh no, this is a beautiful trait. And let's just go back maybe 120 seconds to the period where you're talking about, you are a studio musician, you're performing basically 8 hours a day, and then you're going to the Four Seasons at night. I mean, that's like so many folks, the classic, what is it, 10-year overnight success or 10,000 hours, all these things you've heard, but you don't actually understand what that looks like on a day-to-day level. It's easy to say the words 10,000 hours, and yet if you look at the lives of yourself, of the Beatles, of Lady Gaga, so much time is put in mastering.
So much time.
Yes, so much time, which requires that you enjoy the process. So talk to me about the process that you go through. Presumably this is enjoyable most of the time. And as you said, I'd like to put a pin in the burnout because that's a real thing we want to talk about in a second. But talk to me about the love of the process of creating music.
I mean, my second passion is probably photography and architecture. And I bring that up because there's an element of composition in it. But the only thing that's going to get you through those dark nights, the constant rejection, and people looking at you sideways. For example, when you come to them with an idea or a song, and you think if that's a hit, ask me. I still think some of my best work's sitting on a shelf, unpublished. Wow. And but what do I know? And then all of a sudden, you walk into a room one day, and you literally, in 3 hours, you write a song called Wrecking Ball, and with two people that you don't know, and it changes your life yet again. But your question was, remind me your question.
No, specifically because about the process, loving the process. And in order to, let me just give you a brutish example. I loved taking photographs such that I could put film in my camera, and a handful of rolls in my pocket, and just walk walk into the woods and take pictures for hours. This is when no one's watching. There's no fans cheering you on. There's no time pressure. This is a love of the process of composition and creating and experimenting and making mistakes and recovering. And, that to me, that is it's a requirement for I think for greatness or for mastery in any field. And I want to know what your experience of the process of playing the piano is. Is it, clearly if you're going to do something for 12 hours a day, you have to enjoy it. Was there a pressure there? Was there a joy there? Was there an abandon? Was it like, were you, how did you reconcile all of the hours with, your love for the music?
I think, as I mentioned to you before, I mean, my relationship with this instrument, the piano, is so intimate. I probably had a conversation with this instrument more than anyone in my entire life. Like I've spent the most time with this living, breathing piece of wood more than anyone in my life. My process, in a lot of ways, as early as I was probably 10 or 11 when I started to understand the relationship between notes. So when I saw that these created basic chords of music, all of a sudden I would start to just make my own mistakes at the instrument and develop my own language, my own harmonic language. And I just sometimes will just sit down and have a conversation. I'll do this for 2-3 hours. And that sort of the prelude to my process, even in recording piano music. A lot of people ask me, I go out of my way to record off the click. For people who don't understand what that means, in pop music, you have you record to a metronome or in a computer. So you got. Now, in piano music, I mean, I wanted to come back, after being involved, producing, co-writing these massive, massive songs with sometimes north of 100 tracks with orchestras, to the reductive element of the piano. Just one, it's like one individual, myself talking, a piece of wood, and myself just kind of hearing my own thoughts again. So because I have a nice studio and it's my own studio, I can sit and have this conversation and record and just put my hands down at the piano and play for hours, and then listen to myself and edit what I think is the best part of that conversation, and have a piece of music be that raw. I mean, Tales of Solace on this album, there's nothing that's punched in this album. Everything is just literally a stream of consciousness. And I hear it when I hear other piano players. I kind of go, that individual's using a click, or that person's not. And we could sit here and philosophize that the world has needed room to breathe. I mean, here we are, we're all quarantined right now, but pre-quarantine, my creed was bring reduction. My world was too busy. My world was too big. I moved to LA and success happened, and I was just like, I fucking can't take this anymore. I just want to hear myself think again, which is why silence and peace and solace are so important to me. I strive to protect my creative time. I strive to protect my time alone at the instrument, because it's one of the few things that brings me just allows myself to hear myself my thoughts, et cetera. So anyhow, again,
well, let me let you know, we got people coming in from all over the world. We've got England, we've got South Africa, we've got Arizona. Couple of folks chiming in, just wanted to say some nice things. Espacios says, congratulations, love your Exposure album. Part of the hey, Jeff Slabotsky out there, nice to see you guys. Stefan is a genius, Derek says. That's from YouTube.
Nice.
Okay, a little bit about your process. We touched on that. I want to go forward now, let's say 10 years to being blocked. You talked about putting in all your time, and speaking of time, Mayor, M-A-I-R, says, I'm at the beginning of my process after 20,000 hours. Wow. So you've mastered your instrument. You've been playing 10 hours a day for 20 years. And how do you make the time that you have with your piano, how do you make it special? Because at some point you get blocked, you have a couple of hits, and what we call in what they say in sports is the sophomore jinx, right? Or I guess that's right. Even in music, the album, like the second album is always hard. So you've had this first wave of success, let's say pre-moving to LA. How do you keep going when things are tough?
It's an excellent question. I know you had David Foster, who was a friend and mentor of mine, on the show recently. And David, he called me up after my first hit, 15 years ago with Celine, and he says, congratulations, now your second one is going to be even more difficult. And he was right. There was actually like a gap in between, if that makes any sense.
Oh, for sure.
And however, I was probably more prolific in that gap. I was more creative than I ever was. And I really enjoyed your interview with Steve Aoki recently as well. And Steve said something very true. And I just said it earlier, is a lot of times people think because you see the streaming number, if you go to Stefan Maki on Spotify, you see that this song has 8 million streams and the other one only has 200,000, that the 8 million is better. And that's not the case. That's not the case. But it's Jesus, I'm just getting sidetracked here.
No, I love it. I love it. So when you're burned out, or when someone like David Foster says, yes, hey kid, good job, but get back to work, is essentially what he's saying to you, right?
Working and creativity, to me, I don't know about everybody else, it is a muscle. Like I've written my biggest songs on the days that I was most uninspired, if that makes any sense. So I think walking into this room here, this studio, it's like going to the gym. I mean, you don't want to get up in the morning necessarily and do it, but and after, you don't ever regret the after results. Like, once you've exercised, you don't say, fuck, I wish
I didn't hit the gym. No one said that ever.
No, absolutely not. And the same thing with piano, because even though I love spending my time here, there's kind of days where I kind of go, why, I just don't want to do this. But then all of a sudden, because I can come up with a melody in my head and be obsessed with it and work it through. Or the other way people ask me, how do you compose? Is I just literally put my fingers down, and then you kind of see what happens. And then and you just go with it, and you go and you go and you go, and next thing you know, you may have.
But that is just for anyone who identifies as a creator. You felt these moments of flow, and flow doesn't happen before you start. That's the thing that most people miss, right? And just for example, you say, I set my hands on the keys and then I see where it goes. Notice you didn't say, I sat on the bench and looked at the keys. You had to actually start doing something. And it's like at the gym, you have to start moving your body. And you can't, I don't know, to me, this act of doing, I think it's interesting that every one of your, when you have just touched the piano and played something beautiful, strung a couple of notes or chords together there for us, you're always, the first thing you're doing is touching. You're actually, the act of creating inspires the next note. It's almost like you're pulling on a thread or walking down a path. So part of hearing the piano makes me want to hear more of the piano. So before we do, I want you to start thinking about what track may be off your new album you might be willing to play for us. In the meantime, there's a bunch of questions. Well, first of all, it's important for me to say that John Bracey, your university professor, is in the comments giving you a shout out. And
I love John Paul.
But importantly, a question has just come up about creating success for yourself. So those folks are, yes, we're all putting in our hours, Stefan, but how do we get noticed? Because you've spent, 10% of the last 20 minutes using words like Celine Dion and Sony Music and Universal, and these are all, global brands tagged with, multi-platinum hits, tagged with big dollars, and yet there's so many of us who are waiting for our break, who have not yet seen or found or connected with the person that can help us. We have not published enough music to be recognized as a master. We have not, et cetera, et cetera. So in part for Mayor, M-A-I-R, Prudence, right, what did you do in order to get recognized? Was it just a matter of showing up? Was there some hack, some trick?
I know, and there's no formula to it, but my mom always told me, do what you love, and the money will follow. I've been broke many times. Make a lot of money, go broke. It's the classic spirit of the entrepreneur. But you have to have the stomach for it. The thing, but a lot of us, today, I find I just generalize everybody. We want a shortcut to greatness without putting in the hours, right? How many times the record labels come to me after doing Earned It for the Weekend, and they want that big orchestral fancy sound. And I'm not blaming labels, but they don't realize. I mean, goddamn! 30 years of my life I've been studying Brahms. I'm studying, Shostakovich, Mozart, Beethoven, deconstructing their scores, late at night in the library, and understanding the voicings and how to put, violins together to make that sound. But it just didn't happen overnight. And I don't, that's the problem. A lot of people say, oh, you make it, the great ones make it look easy, but and there's no such thing as genius as well. I mean, Mozart was called a genius. John Williams' best answer was, no, I'm not a genius. I'm just a guy who works hard. That's all I do. I work so hard, and I work hard.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. You have to be ready. You've said this as cliche, not to you, but I'm saying this is a cliche quote. You have to be prepared to be uncomfortable. It's the same thing. I was ready, and like I said, when I was a kid, I took the risk on me. I was taking the loans from the bank to get the microphones in order to create the song to sell to Celine Dion. I took the risk with my manager, and it wasn't a label, and all of a sudden, people are there to collect when you are successful. And you learn a lot of great life lessons on the other side of success as well. And, and another thing we can spend a whole podcast on is dealing with the balance of not having work. And the opposite is maintaining success, which is really, really tough. But listen, I mean, I go off on my rant. But
no, is there any prescription other than just continuing to practice? Like, is it about in order to get noticed? And because I think we fall in love with rock stars because they pour their souls out on the stage for us. And yet, if they're pouring their souls out in their parents' basement and no one ever hears that music, or no one ever sees they don't see the light of day, or they're not intentionally putting themselves, you talked about taking risks, but I want to know specifically, what are some things that you've done to put yourself in the arena, to be at a place where other people who can, because look at, even though you may consider yourself a solo artist, and this goes to anyone out there, nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything requires a community. And so I'm curious, as are Sky and Stella and Gina and John and Allie and Shantae, who are tuning in from all over the world, want to know what did you do specifically to build some community, to put yourself in the right rooms to get the attention that you have clearly received?
I mean, you just said it there right at the end, to get in the right room with the right people. And I may shoot myself in the foot for saying this, but we also live in a different age. But again, I'm aging myself. But back in the day, pre-YouTube, pre-internet, Instagram, and all that stuff, you physically had to be in a big city. So in Canada, I grew up, like I said, in a small town called Niagara Falls, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and it was south of Toronto. But I knew that I had to get myself to Toronto as fast as possible, okay, because it's the mecca of Canadian pop culture. But I also knew in the back of my mind that Toronto, God bless, I love my hometown. If I want to go all the way, I had to move to Hollywood eventually, at some point. And I can, the proof's in the pudding. And the thing is, I'm a big believer in being in the same room as somebody. If you live in a small town, you have to use the tools. If you don't have the finances, of course, you have to use it. We live in an era now where you can crack. I mean, Justin Bieber is from a small little town outside of Toronto, Ontario. I mean, he got discovered, and one of the biggest pop stars today. Now, but people want to know how they break it in. For me, it happened. For example, a great story was when I wrote an Olympic theme for Vancouver. I have to say that, and it becomes part of your national pride, and you hit a ceiling once you write an Olympic theme for your nation. And at that point, I was looking at myself sideways and saying, I have no place else to go other than Hollywood. And I say Hollywood in that, I co-wrote a song with The Weeknd called Earned It. And had I not been living here, Chase, when I got the call from Sam Taylor Johnson, the director of that film, when they were spotting their end credits song and they needed something that sounded like Marvin Gaye and had an old feel, if I couldn't show up to that spotting session in that screening room within 45 minutes, I wouldn't be nominated for an Academy Award. I wouldn't have performed with, Abel. We wouldn't have the Grammys. Like, none of that would have happened if I wasn't geographically living in Los Angeles. So, short answer is get yourself to LA, get yourself to New York, get yourself to London. I mean, Berlin. I'm just the big cities in the world that have culture, the big cities that have connections. You can crack with social media, but the thing is, relationships are everything, as you know, and it's people. And it's like not until they hear you living, breathing in the same room that magic really starts to happen. It's so anyhow.
Speaking of relationships, I would love to hear a little bit more about your relationship with the instrument sitting next to you there. And again, if you're just joining, I want to say welcome to this gigantic. Now we got. I think I'm counting. We're in the 20 different geographies, including states and countries. So we're probably, that's fair to say, global. I want to welcome you. I'm with Stefan Macchio, and we are about to hear a couple of new tracks off his new album, Tales of Solace, which is coming out the 28th of August. And this has been a couple of years in the making. And then when we decided that we could make it happen, we needed to, jump through all the hoops so that you could actually perform. So I'm going to stop talking and let you do what you do among the very best on the planet, and that is play the piano.
There's a song called Fracture, and it literally is just that. It's fractures of a relationship.
Keep going. Don't let me stop you. Keep going. Okay. Give me one more.
Give you one more. A song called Whitby. Actually pertains to a town where Dracula's from, and I met someone special who opened my world to that. Here is Whitby.
Wow. God.
Chase.
Oh man. I'm maybe it just sounds extra good to me because we got a pipe directly.
No. That's
the hairs on my arm are standing up.
I'll play you a few more. But I just thought about this as I was playing. I wanted to explain to people, all the musical people on this particular broadcast here, what's special about this piano. People don't realize I get a lot of messages asking me, why does your piano have a velvety muted sound and stuff like that? And I have a great relationship with Yamaha pianos. This is one of their premier upright pianos, but more importantly, there's a piece of felt in here. So for example, if I lift this up and I play that same piece that I just did, listen to how abrasive it sounds. With the mute. Anyhow, food for thought.
But what that sounds like to me, Stefan, that sounds like mastery. That sounds like knowing your language enough. You've played enough to have your own voice. And that's a question that I'm seeing a lot in the comments here. Again, they're starting to move a little bit faster than I can keep track of them. I'm screen capping them so I can remember them. But how did you develop your voice? Is it time? Is it when do you know something's truly yours? You talked about, studying the masters and deconstructing their work. And how does that translate into you finding your own voice and, I guess, just finding your voice and creating that personal style that you just demonstrated so perfectly for us?
Again, it's a great question. I through the years in my entire life, and I still do this. I'll do this to the day I die. But there's a million ways I'm playing a C major scale. I'm just now giving a master class in music. But I mean, to spice that up, you can actually change the inside of that chord where it make it sound a little more interesting. And that just comes with years and hours and just kind of seeing trial and error, what works, what doesn't work, messing up the sound. I mean, there's really nothing wrong you can do at the piano. There's just more pleasant sounds that you can create. There's, every sound you can go like that, or you can go like, and but it's just seeing what works and the relationships between. I know a trick that people will ask me a lot of times is how can you transpose on the spot and so fast. I mean, there's patterns in the keyboard that I see. It's like a puzzle in a lot of ways, and once you kind of decode the instrument, you can do literally anything. I mean, for all the musos out there, I mean, Cole Porter, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, can only play in one key, G flat major, and people go, God, G flat major is murder. No, it's not. It's actually one of the easiest keys to play. Even do a scale in G flat major, but Cole Porter was not trained, and he just wrote, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. So all in the same key, and then eventually the arrangers transpose it for him. But so all that to say, I developed my own musical language. I mean, David Foster from the pop side of things, I listened to his records for years, and then eventually just sort of made my own voicings happen.
And that is a product of repetition and clearly practice, sure. But how much of that came from fear? Was it overnight that you just said, okay, this is who I am and this is my voice? What if I get it wrong? I'm trying to think of the questions that we all of us who identify as creators or entrepreneurs are sitting at home. Is this the right? Should I claim this? Is this my thing? how do you know if it's the right sound? How do I know? So what kind of language is going on in your head when
I
you
don't.
were?
Yeah, I don't think you do know. And, it's not like, and I never woke up one day and said I wanted to be an artist. I think, it's just kind of in you. I woke up and as I became a student of music, I would listen to records and I would sometimes get upset if I didn't hear an inversion or a chord played the right way, and where it could be played better. So all of a sudden, if you're going to complain about things, you actually have to take the matters into your own hand and just do something about it. Otherwise, just shut the fuck up. Excuse me, but it's just like stop complaining. So in that same creed is I apply it to music. If I'm going to sit there, how many times have you or like of all of us like sat and said, how did that song make it to the radio? And you kind of go and I still say it today. I mean, and that's why I sort of taken this sort of sabbatical for a minute from pop music, because I was frankly getting tired of it. Pop music is intoxicating when it's amazing, and there's amazing pop writers. But there's so much politics that, put the wrong songs at radio, that commerce drives the wrong art. So I said, you know what? I'm in a position again, just shut up and just go back to the piano and create something that you want to listen to.
That's it right there. That's the
right
point,
there.
right? That's what do you want to listen to?
Exactly.
What do you want to like? What would you like to see more of in the world? I wrote Creative Calling because there was a book that I didn't get when I needed it most, and I couldn't see it out there in the world. If you hear a song and it rubs you the wrong way, what's the song that you would replace it with? Whether this is a book, a photograph, a painting, a piece of art, a piece of architecture. This is where, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I'm just ranting because this is like, I think you just said it so eloquently. It's like, do the work. If you're seeing something out there and it doesn't sound right to you, what does sound right to you, and what can you do to put it out there in the world? You owe it to the world, especially, if you're sitting there, sort of lamenting in your brain about what's out there in the world. Go ahead, make something beautiful. Put it out there.
If you're in a position of some type of influence or power, where people are actually listening to you, I think the older I get, the more difficult it becomes to be, you have to honor that voice. You have to listen to it. The older you get, you just become, your mortality is questioned. So all of a sudden you're saying, listen, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. Like literally after a certain point, I'm going to completely go on to something, because there's something I want to show and share with our, with the community here is let's just deconstruct one mega song that I've been part of. Wrecking Ball, for example.
Okay.
We have Wrecking Ball.
Before you deconstruct it, just play a few bars, just so that people just like, okay, great, I'm reuniting with the song, and then deconstruct it first.
Okay. Yes. But Wrecking Ball, in a lot of ways, is a piece of classical music. I mean, just the chorus alone. I mean, it's a tender piano melody. And it's almost like a piece of Baroque music. And so when you actually strip down the song itself, and Miley heard the song stripped down, it wasn't, the bombastic production it ended up being. She just heard it, a piano vocal. I mean, so I just again, just want to show people that the elements, every piece of information on a creative level is provided for you in the piano playing and the vocal for Wrecking Ball. and so forth, and the rest is history.
Just bangs out global mega hit, and the rest is history. Speaking of history, you are about to make it with your first solo debut album. What's it like to go from playing and performing music that you are collaborating with others on, writing songs, producing songs for others, and your name on your album out there in the world? Talk about the movement from one space to this new space, which I think some folks are putting the link to pre-order your album available August 28th here. What's the gap there? Because that seems big to me.
Can I just kind of take you back when I decided I wanted to come back to the instrument?
Do it. Take us there.
Okay. So after being involved again with Miley and The Weeknd and a bunch of big hits, we were cutting strings in London, England in 2018 for Celine Dion. And I have to remind people that I'm Canadian, and I say that because Canada is a very interesting cultured country. I'm sitting there waking up before the string session in London that day for Celine, and classical music came on. And I just felt like an imposter a little bit in pop music for the longest time. We can write our greatest songs, and it was frustrating for producers. And we don't talk about the fact that I could pour myself in, and I believe I've written some even greater pop music that hasn't been released. But the label, the management can all decide to nix it, and all of a sudden your work doesn't go anywhere. And that I experienced that frustration